Thank you. We're just going to give everyone a few more minutes. It's just 7:02, another couple minutes, as technology sometimes can have its challenges, and we want to be respectful to that. So thank you for your patience. I'm going to move my phone a little bit over. So for those of you who are in attendance waiting, I will say that we got some well-needed rain in the last half an hour. I'm sure the grass and trees and flowers are very happy about that.
We've been holding pretty steady on numbers, so I think we could probably get started and people can join us.
Yep, you're good to go.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. As we continue our conversation on awareness to action, tonight we're going to focus on what we as a community and our police department can do in terms of interacting with Black youth. Before we get started, I want to thank the Maplewood Library, the great team there, our Maplewood Community Board on Police, and Valley Arts, New Jersey. I also like to recognize those who, really made this happen. Paul Williams, Aaron Scherzer, Emily Waski, Salima Leatham, and of course, Sarah Lester. Thank you all for your commitment to putting this program together tonight. Even in the aftermath of George Floyd, we obviously know there's still more work to be done. We don't have to look very far, although it wasn't a young person. What happened to Jacob Blake in the last 48 hours or so is, again, another testimony to what needs to be done and how we need to improve our relations in our communities throughout the United States. One thing that I also want to touch on is the fact that we are continuing to look at our own department in ways. It's public knowledge that we focused on our auxiliary police. We continue that research and process to see what makes sense for our community in these modern times. And we also are working closely with other municipalities, putting pressure at the county and state level regarding what it means to be in terms of Section 40A, which is a big part of what theoretically empowers some officers who are not having the best intentions from being brought to justice, in my opinion. So now that I've moved on and kind of give you an introduction, I want to turn the floor over to Paul Williams so that he can talk to you a little more about the panelists that'll be on for us this evening. And again, thank you for joining us. And I hope you find our conversation to be fruitful and you take something from it. And then not only you take something from it, you share it with others. Be the ambassadors, be the catalysts, spread the word. And we appreciate it. Paul.
All right, great. Thanks, Frank. So I just want to walk everybody through the agenda. We have a program that's going to be about 2 hours. But it's going to be jam-packed all the way to the end, and I think insightful all the way through to the end. So just ask that you guys stick with us, and there's going to be a few times of participation. This isn't a one-way session. It'll be very interactive, and so ask that you guys be prepared there as well. Just as a housekeeping thing, we will have a Q&A section at the end, but we will use the chat functionality to capture the questions. So if you have questions as you go along, please put them in the chat, and when we get to the Q&A portion, we'll cover those. So with that, I actually want to introduce the other panelists that are here. All right, so Emily and Salima, you guys on?
Salima, you want to go first?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I work at the Maplewood Memorial Library with Emily and Sarah and others, and I work in the children's room there. I'm also a community member. I live right here locally, and I have a child who's in the middle school right in our town. And I talk with him, as many parents of color do, on what to do if and when he is stopped by the police. So this particular topic is very important to me.
And my name is Emily Witkowski. I'm the teen librarian at the Maplewood and Hilton Branch Libraries, and I work very closely with the middle school and high school students in our community. And I think the real impetus for me in having this kind of conversation was after the murder of George Floyd, and we saw the first protest was organized in Maplewood. It was a student-led protest, and nearly all of those students that organized it were library regulars, so kids that come to the library every day after school and sit with me and talk with me and attend our programs. So I really wanted to provide a platform for their voice and for their perspective.
Great, thank you, Emily and Salima. And as Frank said, thank you guys very much for your participation in putting the program together. All right, Erin.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Erin Scherzer. Along with Paul, I'm a member of the Maplewood Community Board on Police. I was one of the community members that worked with the township and the police department and the community to create this board, which is one of a few civilian police boards in the state of New Jersey and one of the first in a suburban community. My role and background in being engaged here is that the function of our board is to improve community police relations, to provide the necessary support to our department so that everyone can live and work and play and socialize in our community and in our surrounding communities, free of harm, free of bias, and free of challenges. Some of the background on today's program stems from research that the Community Board on Police did regarding non-emergency 911 calls. And my colleague Paul, my fellow board member Paul, will share a little bit more on that very shortly. It also comes out of conversations we've had with the community and with our officers who are on the line today, observations that they see in the community about biased calls into police and particularly against our Black and brown youth in town. So looking forward to the program ahead.
Yep, thanks, Erin. And just to introduce myself now, I'm Paul Williams. I'm here representing kind of two hats. So I'm on the Maplewood Community Board of Police with Erin. And then also I chair the board of Valley Arts, which is an organization that's focused also on working with community in Orange. I'm a Maplewood resident and I'm a father of four. So one of my big impetus for joining the Community Board on Police is, as the father of four Black girls, it's very important to me that they get the same treatment as everyone else here in town, as they grow and live here. Just in case anyone has questions about the Community Board on Police or wants to look at some of the prior work that's been done, there's the URL here on this slide, and a little bit later we'll put it in the chat so that folks can grab that later if they want to. Okay. All right. So again, what I wanted to do is just give some statistics. So I think everybody's well aware that as Erin alluded to, when we tend to have challenges related to the police being called unnecessarily on Black and brown people in this community. But one of the things I always try to do as a person is like a why, kind of trying to ask yourself, why did these things happen in the way that they happen, and what kind of caused this? So I wanted to share some background and some statistics that I think could point to why we start to have the scenario that we have. So first, this is some data from Pew Research. For those of you who are not familiar with it, Pew is kind of like Nielsen that you may know a little bit better, but they do research on just a lot of anthropological studies on people's behavior. A lot of times it's for consumer products, but just in general. And here, one of the big takeaways that you can see here is that people generally do not spend a lot of time with people outside of their own ethnicity or race. And so, you know, in Maplewood, one of the things that the town prides itself on is being a very diverse place. And so in general, we're probably better off than much of the rest of the country, but there's still some pretty glaring gaps here. So if you can see, these are broken out by group. So this would be whites, blacks, Hispanics, and Asians, right? And what they're showing is what percentage of the people say that they spend a lot of time is the darker part, and the lighter part is some time with different ethnic groups, right? So for example, 84% of the whites would say that they spend a lot of time around whites, and then some would say some. And then you'd say that 25% of whites say that they spend a lot of time around blacks, and then 46% would say they spend some. So I won't go through all of the numbers, but what you'll notice is that whites in particular tend to basically, you know, spend primarily time with other whites. And amongst other ethnic groups, it's a little bit more mixed up. Obviously, that's a function of them being more of a minority group and having lower numbers. But as a result of that, they're spending a lot more time with other groups. But for every group, you'll see that they tend to be basically spend more time amongst their own, with the exception of Asians, actually, interestingly, who spend more time with whites. Again, I think it has to do with numbers in the population. But the general thing is that we don't spend a lot of time interacting with other people. The other thing that's really interesting is if you ask folks about, are there differences in fair treatment for blacks across different things, pretty consistently, you see two things. Blacks in general have a higher percentage of instances of saying that they feel like there's some unfair treatment or unequal treatment than whites typically do. For this study, they just looked at whites and blacks. And you're looking at things like, oops, jumping ahead here. You're looking at things like everything from hiring and pay and promotion, applying for a mortgage, dealing with restaurants, seeking medical treatment, and of course, like in dealing with the police. Interestingly, though, that is the one that's the closest. So you know, you can look at how far apart the dots are. That would tell you like how close the opinions are. And so the one that's closest, actually, where blacks and whites come closest to agreeing, is that they feel like there's a gap in fair treatment between blacks and police. What's really interesting, like if you look at a community like Maplewood, it's actually like a relatively well-off community. You know, it's like a solid middle class, upper class community. And you would think that you would have less racial issues the more, you know, kind of the more you go up. But in reality, the data would suggest that a higher level of educational attainment actually increased the number of instances where people felt like they were being biased against their race. So those are just some interesting like consumer data pieces that, and they looked at things like being treated suspiciously, someone treating them like they weren't as smart, actually being on the receiving end of like a racial slur, instances of fearing for their personal safety, and then being unfairly stopped by police. So that's just a little bit about kind of how people see each other. The next one I wanted to do is like try to show some stats that help to explain like why do people have this kind of strange connection between this perception of blacks in criminal behavior, and a couple of things you want to call out. So one is, as most of you guys probably know, the U.S. has by far the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world, second to the second being El Salvador. What's interesting though is that's actually like a relatively new phenomenon. So this chart on the right shows basically like the rates of imprisonment of the prison population going back to 1925. And if you look here, in 1971 is when the war on drugs started. And for going forward from the war on drugs is when you see it go like through the roof. The first time I saw this chart, I was like blown away at that you could have such a steep incline. So the interesting thing is you go, okay, well, what does that have to do with blacks in criminality and why are you trying to say blacks do more drugs? Absolutely not. Here's an interesting quote from one of the architects of the war on drugs. So this guy was an aide to President Nixon. Nixon was the first person that launched the war on drugs. I won't like read it for you verbatim. I'll let you read it. But basically what he said was like the Nixon administration were not fans of either the hippie movement or at that time, the civil rights movement. And so while you couldn't necessarily criminalize those movements, what the administration did with the public is position them to the public as blacks as marijuana users and blacks as heroin users and hippies as marijuana users. And so you could go and start to basically like demonize those folks. So it's interesting to see like, you know, that's a documented like approach. And the end result of that is one where unfortunately African Americans are now in prison at a rate of 5 times that of whites. And that goes basically the same for adults and for youth. An interesting stat in New Jersey, African American youth are 10 times as likely to be held for placement for the same infraction that a white youth would be released with a warning. And that's local here in New Jersey. In general, and this is nationwide number, although the usage rates are the same, blacks are arrested at 4 times the rate of whites for marijuana. And there was a study done by Stanford, and they looked at over 2 million police stops across the country, and they found that black drivers were stopped at a rate of 3 to 5 times the rate of white drivers. And then also when they were stopped, although they statistically are less likely to find contraband on black and Latin drivers, officers are 3 times more likely to search them. And so, and again, this is data from the state and the national level. So by all means, it's not indicative or an indictment of the folks here in Maplewood, but it just shows you the overall national trends and kind of some of the early rationale for those trends that would cause people to say, have this suspicion of blacks as being more likely to be up to something, because you see a lot more engagement between blacks and law enforcement. So that's one of the things that we wanted to call out. So again, in terms of drug abuse arrests, it's 3 times. As Aaron alluded to, when we looked as part of the community board on police, when we were looking at like suspicious person calls, we found that 73% of the suspicious person calls in Maplewood were where the race of the person was identified were for black or Hispanic folks. And in no cases did those actually result in like criminal charges. So these are cases where, and this is the heart of what we want to address today. These are cases where people are walking down the street, sitting on their porch, sitting in their driveway, walking their dog, waiting on the bus. And we have the verbatims of these, so you can see that that's kind of what happened. Waiting on the bus, or in some cases, we've had the police called on people at the library, which is why we're all here today. So I just wanted to give that bit of background and context for 2 reasons. One, to try to give a little bit of a why as to why people might have this perception, and more importantly, why we know that it's an issue that needs to be addressed. And so that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron for the surveys.
So thank you, Paul, for the background, both nationally, also statewide, and of course within our Township of Maplewood. And I want to give a quick preview to the community of the next study coming out of the Community Board on Police will actually be at our September 2nd meeting, which is next Wednesday, where we will share information of our analysis of traffic stops in Maplewood. So more information to come there. So our exercise today, and I am not going to pretend to be to do the tech side of it. So, but what I can explain is the purpose of the exercise. Our goal today, and part of changing our community mindset, so that our youth, our teens, our young adults can be free and just live life. Is to first start addressing bias within ourselves. And to address bias within ourselves, we need to challenge ourselves internally for what our negative and positive stereotypes so we can work through those together. So what we have here is we're going to first start with some of the negative perceptions or negative stereotypes about Black youth. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can, this is all anonymous. We're going to have a word cloud pop up with populating what members of the community are sharing here. You have a couple of ways. You can take a picture of this QCR code and it'll pop up on your phone. You can go to this website and type in this code here. And we can, I don't know if it's possible to drop the link in the chat so it's easier for people to like click and go. Let's spend a couple of minutes there and we'll start talking about some of the negative perceptions as we, as a community, work through changing our views.
Okay, so guys, if you put your phone up to the code, it will open the URL, or if you, there's actually a typo, that's my bad. It should be menti.com instead of a slash. And then you just enter this code here.
And I am I am not a super tech savvy person, and even I could take a picture of the scan code and the website pops up right away. So we'll spend just about 60 seconds here with what kind of initially comes to mind.
And what we'll do is we'll have a word cloud so that you guys will be able to see. So now, hopefully you guys can see my screen and you'll be able to see the words that come up as we put them in. And basically, like, the bigger the word, the more likely, the more frequently that word has been stated.
So words that we're seeing so far, because I imagine some of us are typing away on our phone, is we have suspicious, loud, disrespectful, the word thug, unsupervised, angry. Whoa, some of these fonts are kind of small. Unruly. So these are some of the negative streetwise. These are some of the words that are starting to pop up now from negative stereotypes. These are negative stereotypes that we have that everyone is trying to address in terms of perceptions of Black youth. We have sassy is another one that popped up. Unintelligent. Sorry, it's a scary.
Drug addict.
So these are some of the things, and so the Paul, I think if you want to explain a bit in terms of why it's important that we dive into our into our internal implicit bias.
Sure.
Get on that while people are populating.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the idea is that whether we believe these things or not, you know, like we live in a society where these are the attributes that are ascribed to folks, and so it requires, like, to young Black folks. And so it requires some effort on our part to make sure that you don't, number one, that we don't start to adopt these things, you know, unfairly against folks, and that we're not applying them to people, you know, in a biased way. And then the other is that we can try to work to try to dismantle some of these stereotypes that are out there. But, you know, it's also very, very important for us to be mindful of what these, you know, where these things are coming from, or that we have them. You know, so for example, the suspicious is like the second biggest word here. And as I just mentioned earlier, you know, for 75% of those calls, it was somebody who saw a Black person just going about their day-to-day life, and they felt suspicious enough about them to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, I think this person is up to something. He's walking his dog slow, you know, or he's waiting for the bus and he let 2 buses pass. And so that kind of bias is what can come into play. So it seems like we started to slow down, Aaron, so I'm gonna switch it back over to the other one.
Switch back over. But Paul, before you switch the slide, one thing I wanted to point out is these stereotypes are not just how we as a group may generally see or have a perception that people see. It's also how this burden also falls on our Black youth in terms of our sometimes interactions with our youth. So if we, one of the things that came out at the community forum back in June were young teens, like teens who are in middle school and the early parts of high school, talked about how people didn't believe in them, thought they were unintelligent, suspicious, things of that nature. And those kind of very harsh words and very harsh feelings add an additional burden to day-to-day life that our youth are going through. So our next bit is to part of working as a community to help us work to be more supportive of our youth and helping them live the life that they all want to live, and we want them to live, is to work on building up our positive associations with Black youth. So Paul is going to pop up a screen here, same as before. If you could take a picture of the QR code, you can click back on this particular link here with the code. We'll drop the code in the chat here. And let's start talking a little bit about the positive thoughts about Black youth.
Okay, so assuming everybody has it, I'm going to go ahead and go over to the screen where we can see the results.
So we have musical, intelligent, funny, creative, confident, self-assured, eager to learn, spirited, strong, handsome, athletic, original. I love the word original, and I think as any parent, we all hope one day that our child can be their original self in the world, and as a community, we could support our original group here as they move and shake this world. We have leaders, we have strong, we have hardworking. It's always important to be funny because this world is a challenging place, and sometimes you just gotta laugh it off a little bit. One thing I'm happy not to see, and some of the font's a little small for my my eyeballs here, but I'm very happy to see that the word articulate is not on here. And I have to say that that is one of the biggest biases that is out there, that and I'm happy that we are focusing on truly the positive qualities of our youth in our community and the youth that we know from all over the world. So this is really great. I love I think enthusiastic just popped up, resilient, which is great.
Mm-hmm. This is actually really good. I'm actually I'm like pleased with how fast this is moving, and how many words are here. Like when I've seen this done in other groups, there was a notable speed at which people could lay out the negatives versus the positives. But here the positives are moving faster than the negatives, which is awesome.
That's good. This
makes me happy for the community. Cool. All right, Aaron, so I think these are great. We'll be able to save these, and we can share them with everybody like after the presentation is over.
Perfect.
I'm gonna pull it back over. All right, so next, I want to share some perspective that we were calling like a day in the life. So as Aaron was highlighting earlier, one interesting dynamic that, really all people have an awareness of what people think kind of good and bad, but I think one of the burdens that Black youth carry is that they know those negative stereotypes. And so you walk through your day trying to navigate those stereotypes, and you want to make sure that someone doesn't have the opportunity to see you as suspicious, or your parents maybe even told you make sure that no one sees you as suspicious or as a thug or whatever. So folks, and then you go through encounters all day with people who with people who are putting those types of things on you as well. And so I took just a sample or a poll of people either who are Black youth or parents of Black youth, just to share, who obviously, like myself, were Black youth at one point. So asked them to provide examples of things that they experienced during the course of the day that they think are like unique, bias-driven items that happen to them. And so some of these, as you guys will see, are like small microaggressions. Hopefully everyone knows the term microaggression. It means like a really small, subtle thing that is based in a bias, like against you. And some of them are more overt, just straight out racist stuff that you see. And so I'll just go through these real quick, and so that you guys can see them, and just know that as kids, as the Black youth are navigating this town, this is the types of things that they're having to encounter or to deal with. And we just want to increase the awareness for folks for two reasons. One, so that you can kind of cut folks a break when you're engaging with them. And two, so that you won't fall, particularly those of us who are adults, will not fall into the trap of like projecting these types of things on these youth. So, one is failing to pronounce a child's name properly. And the person says that they were at a sporting event and a sports banquet, and the coach just butchered the name and then brushed over it like, whatever, it doesn't matter. Another big one, you'll see this theme repeated a few times, is someone asking them, do you live around here? And in this case, they ask, what does your dad do for a living? Or someone expressing about Black kids, like, your kids are so well behaved, as if it's like a surprise. They said that this person has experienced an officer asking them, what's a girl like you driving a car like this, when it was a nice car? And again, some of these are in Maplewood, but some of them are from other places too. Just a difference in tone was noted when people tell a group of kids that are hanging out to move along, whether the kids are Black or white. Adults threatening to call the police on a kid for fishing or exploring the woods in town. Youth that are being singled out for age-appropriate behavior are being disciplined unfairly. So this is, if there was one point that I would really hope that the adults on the call take from this call, is to please just keep in mind like what you were like as a teenager, or how you were as a teenager, and remember those things that are normal, and not call the police on kids who are doing things like hanging out at the 7-Eleven or skateboarding on the street or something like that, or being loud, which almost every young teenager is loud to an extent. This person said that they had an engagement with the officer, and the officer repeated the name in a mocking way with extra emphasis, as if it was a quote unquote hood name. I put this chart of like chutes and ladders, because when you see these things, you start to see like it almost feels like a game of chutes and ladders, where the kid could be moving along pretty good, and then they just have like a setback, whether it's like an actual thing they get in trouble for, or just an emotional setback of. And like I've experienced this, where I'm having a good ass day, and I get to I'm sorry for cursing, a great day, and then I'm at a stoplight, and some crazy lady like locks her doors or something ridiculous like that. So that's what I mean by the chutes and ladders. Commenting on their physical development, especially girls, saying like you're big for your age, or you're grown for your age. Some person highlighted that they had somebody say, you're a big scary guy, to an 11-year-old young Black boy. Being told that you're loud. This person said watching, scoping, jocking, which I interpreted as being treated suspiciously. People pointed out that when groups of white kids walk together, it's no problem, and when groups of Black kids walk together, it's considered threatening, and the cops get called. And again, we see this play out actually here in town. This person shared a story that her sister called the police because her sister's windshield had been busted. And when the officer showed up, the officer made a comment to the effect of, "Oh, I'm sure your parents have dealt with crime before. This isn't the big thing." So as you can imagine, like if you're just going about your day trying to be a good student, these types of things happen to you. It can set you back. Just continuing these like groups, the same concept of a group of kids of color together as like a gang or a problem. People being asked, what are they doing? Like just when they're walking down the street, what are you up to here? For a group of kids, as opposed to just for white kids that assume to be like just doing their own thing. This is Erin's one that she was just talking about being articulate, like saying you read well, or you write well, or you play well with others. Hair touching, anybody who has spent like a reasonable amount of time around a Black woman should know that you should not just randomly touch her hair, but apparently people don't always know that because it's probably one of the #1 complaints that you hear amongst Black women with regard to the way the interactions with white women. There was a person who told an incident, this was in South Orange, where a group of kids were playing in a neighbor's front yard, and the neighbor, the mom of the house, told him, "You don't look like you live around here," when actually he had just like moved in, like onto the street. There were 2 incidents that were called out. These were in Maplewood, where the person was stopped by police to make sure that it was actually his bike, and two separate incidents. There's one where the kid, and most of you guys probably know from social media, like there's this perception that kids from other neighborhoods come in and trick or treat here, which they do, and I would too. When I was a kid, I went to the better neighborhood than my own to trick or treat, just because you got better stuff. But the person asked the kid, you know, how's the neighborhood treating you, even though she was on her own street. So this was her own neighbor. What are you doing in this neighborhood? These last ones are quotes that people have said to these people here in town. What are you doing in this neighborhood? Do you really go to whatever the school is? Looks like you've had experience with getting stopped by the police. You don't look like a student. Just because you go to law school, you think you're smarter than me. And this was an incident where actually these were off by officers. This was an incident where an officer asked the owner of the house was a Black woman. The cleaning lady was there, and they turned to the cleaning lady and asked, was the woman who owned the house a live-in? So that was just making an assumption about the rate, class and race. This was one that happened today. I just thought this was funny because I think most Black folks can relate to this, especially Black males. This was in the news. They have an article about Usain Bolt having gotten tested positive for corona, but the photo is obviously Kevin Hart. So we see a lot of news instances where this happens, but it also happens on a personal level where someone is accused of looking like someone. That's funny on the Kevin Hart thing, but it's not funny because you hear countless stories of people who have been sent to jail because they fit the description, or who at least have had to have an encounter with police unnecessarily because they fit the description, or someone described them as the perpetrator of something based on this idea that folks look alike.
Well, I was going to ask you about that photo when I saw the slide. I said, why is
why is that up there? But yeah, no, it's just the all folks look alike.
Well, I have one more to add, if you don't mind. There's one that's really a pet peeve of mine, which drives me nuts. And I've heard it been, communicate to myself, but they always say, "Hey, stay out of trouble." I can't stand that term.
Yeah.
This is something you hear a lot. Hey, you stay out of trouble. Like, why would I be in trouble? Like, that one you hear a lot. So that's a pet peeve of mine. I can't stand when someone says, "All right, stay out of trouble." I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. So anyway, these are just kind of a day in the life. So what I want to share with you guys now, those were ones that were submitted all over. I want to share with you guys a video. So Emily, who again works at the library, had basically like a panel discussion with a group of teens, and I wanted you guys to be able to hear in their own words. I need to share my screen. In their own words, like how they feel about this. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to edit this as well as I would like to, so I'm going to skip around a little bit. But these are, and what's interesting is these are youth who are frequently at the library, right? And again, they've had incidents or issues of the police being calling them hanging out at the library. But and I won't say anymore. I'll let you just listen to it and let me know. Actually, let me just double check and make sure I'm set for the audio. Yep. All right.
Some kid that was in the Black empowerment group. Well, one of the situations was.
Okay. So I just want to start with have you ever had a interaction with the police in general, whether positive or negative? You guys are obviously pretty young, but have you ever sort of had an interaction to start with in this area?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we have.
Yeah.
definitely.
You want to talk a little bit more about it?
Well, one of the situations was I can relate a lot to when we were talking about people of color having the police called on them for no reason. Like it happened to one of my friends, and Detective Jamodi, I don't know if you know him or not.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one who told, because he was part of this Black empowerment group, and the kid that was in some kid that was in the Black empowerment group was the kid that had the police called on him, and he just let us know, like he cleared it up, of course, like it was a false claim,
Mm-hmm.
but like just that's what's going on. And for me, I've had experiences with the police. Like I was around when the instance on 4th of July happened. I don't know if you're aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
And like seeing it, I also have friends who's had loved ones killed by the police. So it's like the people of color usually,
Just gonna skip it a little bit.
unless like white people just, it's like I can't explain it. It's like false claims are really why police and people of color don't get along.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to share? I could be interested to share a positive one. Anyone else want to add anything?
No, I don't got none. Mine's just positive, so.
Do you want to share? I could be interested to share a positive one.
I'm gonna fast forward it to them.
Did she need water? Like they were just being helpful. Like they weren't like attacking, even though it just seemed like, I really like don't like people like policeman vibes, but like they seemed like they were just like trying to make sure everybody was okay in that situation.
That's actually, I'm glad you said that, Kat, because I was thinking, how do you, like, this is kind of one of my other questions, like, how do you feel when, like, you see a policeman approaching you?
To be honest, like, I'm low-key scared. Like, I feel like I got a target on my back. Like, and it's just like, they think I'm like a weapon and they think like I'm dangerous. So they want to arrest me and they want to, you know, like hurt me or like kill me or something. So like when all that, like that George Floyd like stuff went down, I'm like, I kind of don't want to leave the house. Like, and that's especially like why I don't like hang out with like a lot of like white kids, because like I just don't feel comfortable because of like how they have so much privilege and we don't. Like I feel very of like how they have so much privilege and we don't. Like I feel very uncomfortable.
I'm gonna fast forward it again to the part. This we'll put the whole thing on there because the whole thing is like 38 minutes long, but it's very powerful.
Started to realize it didn't really matter on like the color of the officer. It's just like the job that they had. And if you also think about it, like the whole job of a police officer is to
actually I missed it.
Wanted the officers to take a knee to show that they like actually cared about the community. And there were white officers who definitely did take a knee, but then we had gotten to a black officer and it was like the first officer we had saw on the street, and he like refused to show that he really cared about the issue, if that makes sense. So I don't think, what I kind of started to realize is it didn't really matter on like the color of the officer. It's just like the job that they had. And if you also think about it, like the whole job of a police officer is to protect and serve, but it was never really to protect and serve African Americans or people of color. It was to serve, you know, white people, or to like go find slaves when we were younger. So the whole like backstory behind becoming a cop was never really to like protect the people of color. And so because of that, it's changed, but it hasn't changed in a way to help us. There's nothing really for us to feel like safe in.
I feel policeman, but the sense of security that they should give me, it's the opposite.
So while Paul works on
I feel more secure when
the audio there, I'll explain a little bit about the picture that's behind me. The gentleman I'm with is Brian Stevenson. And for those of you who do not know who Brian Stevenson is, there was a movie that came out the beginning of this year and last year called Mercy Me, which starred Michael B. Jordan, who played Brian Stevenson. Brian Stevenson started the Restorative Justice Institute and has done a miraculous job of really freeing Black men and women who've been incarcerated unlawfully. This is down in Montgomery, Alabama. And I went down there for a couple of days, spent some time with him. And he's just really an amazing person who has just worked tirelessly for justice, and justice when there was no justice. Unfortunately, he's also taken a historical perspective of Black Americans through the years. And behind us are a bunch of jars. They are jars full with dirt. And the dirt has been taken from the locations where African Americans were lynched, back in the day. And unfortunately, there are thousands of jars throughout the museum and throughout his office and in the Oshawa law firm. So what you cannot see is on every jar is the name of the person, the location of city and state, or county and state, and then also the time in which they were lynched. The museum itself is amazing. It just takes a historical perspective from the days of slavery to modern time, and really kind of shows the narrative of where we've gone, but how far we have yet to go. And so anyway, he's really a true American hero, and that's who that person is behind me there. It's Brian Stevenson. And after this, if you have time, look him up, look up his story. It's really a great story. So just wanted to share that with the audience here.
That's awesome, Frank. Let me I'm gonna move this along. Let me get into more of the meat, because there's a lot of good discussion here from the youth. I'm gonna keep it rolling, and I apologize for having to stop and start, but I want to try to get to as much of the content as possible.
Like he serves as a field policeman, but the sense of security that they should give me, it's the opposite. It's like I feel more secure when policemen are around, and that's not for all policemen, such as like Detective Jamodi. Like he serves as a plug for our Black empowerment group, Real Talk, that we did, which basically is just like trying to help young Black males achieve their goals. And like he basically shows us a different side of life. Like he gives us a white man's perspective. He also like took us to a Devils game, and like he just giving us experience.
So nice shout out for Detective Jamodi.
Even though Maplewood Police has had its own events and tragedies, I know that all Maplewood Police officers aren't racist, so to speak. So it's very complex.
Fast forward.
Don't be tense around me.
Because like peer to peer, you guys show respect differently. But like if an adult is coming at you with respect, what does that look like?
For police, I feel like it's not so much as respect as it is fear. Like, don't be tense around me if you're a police officer or if you're a white person. Like, I can tell when somebody's tense. Like, it's obvious. I feel like that's one thing. Another thing would be like, when Officer Jamodi speaks to me, it's not in a way of, I don't know. I feel like some people hold people of color to a white man's standard, and I don't feel as Officer Jamodi does that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of body language.
Yeah,
I feel.
that was one of the things I was gonna say. Like, when it comes to police officers, not a lot of the times, like, well, for me, I feel like, okay, you know, like walking up to you and like having a conversation, so, like, respect for that is different. It's not like respecting like your t-shirt, but it's like you can get weird feelings around certain things. So it's like the way they can like look at you, like if you can tell that there's something different, the tone of their voice, how it's different, if they're shaky around you, like it's more of like that as an aspect, because even as like a kid, you can tell if somebody like thinks different of you or sees.
And like I probably tell you won't even like me because like, you know, I come off a little strong, but like a lot of people don't like me because of that. And it's just like I can tell, I could feel your vibe, like your body language, how you look at me, how you talk to me. Like I can tell that you don't like me, so you're going to disrespect me.
Like that don't.
Would be your suggestion to the police in dealing with kids and teens, but specifically Black kids and teens, brown kids and teens, teens of color? What would be your suggestions for police in reacting and talking with you guys?
Okay, if I'm being honest, this type of question or these type of questions are kind of complicated because you also have to realize it's like not just the police, it's also like the way we live now. Like the different talks that a person of color and a white person will have with their parents about the police are two total different things. Like for me growing up, I was exposed to like the differences between how a white person and a person of color would be treated with police officers. So like I was always taught like about when you're in contact with the police, like not to move so fast. But those are types of conversations that a white person would never really have with their parents. So when they used to come to our school and stuff like that, as easy as it was for the white kid to, you know, raise their hand and ask questions, it was harder for a person of color to raise their hand and ask these questions because, you know, you don't want them to get suspicious or anything like that. So suggestions towards it would kind of be maybe to like know that you can actually, you know, trust them, because they could come to our school and act like they're the best things in the world, but then you like seeing them on the street stop somebody of color for no actual reason. So I think like a suggestion I would have is maybe to create a connection with the kids more, you know. Don't act like you're trying too hard because you can tell, but to like genuinely show them that you care. Really.
Like even if you don't care, just show. Like I know it's kind of fake, but like it's better to like show like that you somewhat care. Like don't. That's what I literally tell my mom that. I'm like, don't sit there and say like assume or like do all of this stuff. Just sit there and act like you care. Like don't do that. And just like as Sophia said, like make a connection with us. Like that's why we don't trust you now. Like to be honest, we're never going to trust you because of what you did to us for many years. But at least you're trying to make a bond with us so we can try to trust you, try to actually depend on you to actually save us in a crisis. Like right now, they're just going off the deep end.
And don't size me.
In dealing with, I said adolescents, but basically kids and teens, but specifically,
We're not going to try.
what's your suggestion to police in dealing with, I said adolescents, but basically kids and teens, but specifically Black kids and teens, brown kids and teens, teens of color?
I feel like just show me respect, really. Don't size me. Like, don't size me. I know a lot of police officers who would look me up and down for no reason. It's really just respect. Don't talk to me how you wouldn't talk to a white person. That's really what it is. Like, I'm not even asking for you to make a connection to the Black community, even though, like, I'm speaking of the community board on police. I don't know if you know Mr. Stedemeyer or not, but he wanted me to get on board with it, and so did Detective Jamodi.
Absolutely. Actually, that's a great segue into sort of my last big question, and it's sort of really broad, so I hope you guys don't mind. So we've been focusing on police, but there's sort of another part of this, right? Like, the police are responding to calls from the public. So there's another element to this where someone in the general public may be making that call. I know we've had incidents at the library, like I said before, where either a staff member calls because they don't feel like they have control of the situation, or we've also had experiences where patrons who are not involved in the situation make a phone call to the police and don't alert the staff. And then the police show up and we don't really know what's going on. So there's another side to this, right? So what would be your suggestion to people who make those calls to the police? What sort of things do you think they should ask themselves or do before they make that move?
Okay, this is gonna sound sad, but like, for me, it's just to kind of like mind your business. Like, and the only reason I say that is because a lot of the times when people do make calls, and this is like everywhere, like there was some guy who was walking in a park and the white girl in New York, and the white girl thought he was too close to her or he looked scary, and she called the cops on him, and like 5 cop cars came down with like their guns and everything. Like, everyone was ready for something to actually happen for him to just be peacefully walking in the park. It's stuff it's stuff like that just is just like, mind your business at the end of the day. Like, if you don't really see anything, because it's always people who are either too scary and they think they see something, or they want to be right. Like, it's stuff like that that is the reason why society is so messed up right now. You see a Black person walking in the night, scared.
We're almost done. I just want to close with this last section here.
I'm glad. I know, I think about this all the time. I'm obviously not Black. I obviously don't know what you guys go through on a daily basis, but I do think about it a lot, and I try. I guess I'm coming from a place of, I know that, like, excuse my language, the society's fucked up, right? This is a mess right now. But we got to try to fix it, right? So I don't know what that is. I don't know what it looks like, but my hope is that maybe if we keep having these conversations, and you're right, Phil, we can talk till we're blue in the face, but if we don't do anything, what's the difference, right?
To be honest, no cap, it's not like we can fix anything right now. we can't do anything. It's when white
It's just
people need
not
to
the right
speak up
approach.
because they have the privilege. We don't. We can just scream. We can just show them that we're angry. We can just show them that we're just mad. But but white people kind of actually have the privilege to change something. And you have to you
That's
gotta
true.
tear down the whole entire system to actually change. You have to build up a different system because this system is so messed up. It's terrible.
It is.
You have to destroy it.
But you also, okay, but it's messed up for us. Because, like, if you really think about it, the system is perfect for the people who designed it. It was supposed.
All right, one last one.
Where I have privilege, so I want to try to do something about this, and I need to hear from you guys what it is that needs to be done, right? So I so appreciate you guys being so open and honest with me. I know it's not easy, and I'm so appreciative of the way that you guys speak to me so openly.
Of course, because we love you.
Yes,
I love you guys. You have no idea how much.
All right, guys. So I will stop there. I apologize for not having that edited better, but hopefully you guys still got a sense, or edited at all. But hopefully you guys got a sense of what's on the minds of the youth. You know, and again, they're not. It's not always going to be, you know, presented like a professional PowerPoint, but it's what's coming from their heart. So I appreciate their willingness to participate in that and kind of share candidly what's on their mind. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron to introduce the officers.
Yeah, so we're fortunate to have a number of our Maplewood police officers with us this evening because they're all members of the community here, and they all want the best for everyone who lives here, plays here, socializes, and works here. I want to give a very brief bit of context before I introduce our officers who are here this evening with us. So as a Black woman raised by my mom, who raised me with good street smarts in terms of interacting with law enforcement, my mom grew up in the South, I always had respect for officers, but I always also personally had my own internal fears. And I won't forget when the work to mobilize the community board on police started, there was actually, I had my doubts. And I won't forget, it was a night in September, and I ran into an officer in the village during an evening, and he stopped me and he said, "Hey, I'm hearing what all of you advocates are talking about. I just want you to know we're not that far off. The officers in the community aren't that far off on this. Like, we want these changes too. We need to talk." I was like, okay, I'm from Buffalo, so I like to talk, I like to get to know people, and I like to understand. And so began my understanding of the Maplewood Police Department and understanding where our officers are coming from, how they want to change in terms of how policing used to be. As one of the officers who's on the call tonight described it, it used to be in the world of policing like the Wild Wild West, and how that line of work is changing. And through the department, they are committed both to training, both to internal reflection, both in terms of the day-to-day supervision of colleagues and working together to make things better. So we have a wide variety of officers who are on the call tonight, and a variety of ranks, a variety of different functions. And I want to thank Deputy Chief Sally, who's second in command in the police department, for helping us to find a variety of officers who to share their perspective in working with youth and young adults and kids at times within our community. Each of these officers I know, and each of them in their capacity have some sort of leadership function within the department. I mean, obviously Deputy Chief Sally is second in command, has a lot going on there. We have Captain Malloy, who's third in command of the department. She's in charge of training and internal affairs. We have Officer Lindsay Rella, who works, in addition to being an officer on the street, She also is working with Captain Malloy on developing training programs and bringing the voice of the community with Officer Malloy, who's also out in the community, to the training. We have Sergeant Vinny DeSico, who is one of the many hats he wears. Is he's the watch commander, which is the person on the shift who's responsible for the day-to-day, and he's the one that has to coach up and coming officers and officers that are on duty on how to better respond to situations so that they're going forward. We have Sergeant Scott Reeves, who heads the traffic bureau, and he is also similar to Sergeant DeSico, working with his colleagues to ensure to better the community relationships there. I know many of our youth, and we heard reference to Detective Jamodi, who has done significant work with our Youth Restorative Justice Program. We're one of the few communities that has such a program to help keep our kids out of the criminal justice system, help build better relations when conflicts happen, and has done tremendous work there. And a lot of that work is stemmed by hearing from our youth and empowering our youth, and quite honestly, for all of the officers here, empowering our community to do better by them. And last and certainly not least, one of the very first officers I met as part of some of this work is Officer Brian Lewin, who takes every opportunity to go out and better interact when he's out on duty, and even when he's off duty, better interacting and better engaging with youth on a real level. So I thank them, for all of our officers here today, for their participation. And I think let's open it up with, if you could share, I know you all, either some of you are parents and some of you have lived your own life. Tell us a little bit about, let's step beyond the badge, behind the body armor. Let's talk as people. Tell us about how it feels when you're not in uniform, whether you're a kid or now, about your interactions when you were out in the world.
I'll start off. Good evening, everybody. Deputy Chief Sally, Maplewood Police Department. Before I get back to my youth, I do want to piggyback on what somebody said. As a supervisor in the Maplewood Police Department, I've had occasions where we respond to a call, and I'm there with a patrolman, and the person speaks directly to the patrolman and act like I'm not even there. So I know, I see that even now. So some things never change. But to go back to my childhood, my friend of mine, my fraternity brother, he used to come to my town and pick me up to go out. So he graduated college. He got a pretty good job right out of college. He was driving a black BMW back in 1990 something with the 6 CD changer in the trunk and all that good stuff, and the tinted windows. And every time he would come into my town, he'd get followed by the police, and even followed right into my parking lot where my apartment complex was. And they would wait for me to come out to verify that he was coming to pick me up. So this happened a lot. So we had, so that was a negative interaction there. A positive interaction for me is that before I moved, my next door neighbor was a police officer, and he was actually the first African-American chief in the town I grew up in. So I had that positive role model and interaction growing up, and know his whole family and everything else. So that was a positive for me. I guess in the back of my mind made me want to, pursue this career and then, go through the ranks. So those are 2 stories of mine. I'm gonna let everybody else answer that.
Who wants to jump in next?
Hi.
Okay.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Just really briefly, so I was born in Newark. We moved around a little bit when I was a kid, but for the most part, I grew up in Irvington, very close to Maplewood. I do have, I guess, one negative Maplewood police interaction story from my childhood. I'm the oldest of 4 children. My mom and my 2 younger brothers and my sister, we were walking up Springfield Avenue, almost in the area of where the police department is now. We were going to ride our bikes in Maple Crest Park. And as we were getting closer to the park, a police officer pulled up to us. I still remember it. I was maybe about 12 years old. and asked my mom if she had a park permit. And my mom was like, well, what's a park permit? He said, well, the park is for Maplewood residents. You have to have a Maplewood park permit in order for you guys to come to the park. So my mother said, okay, well, we don't have a permit. So she turned us around for us to walk back home. I mean, at the time, I lived by Grove Street and Springfield Avenue, which is a really terribly far walk. And I remember walking home, my mother basically just explained that sometimes people don't want you in neighborhoods where you don't live. So that was like my negative Maplewood police interaction story. I became a police officer for a lot of reasons. One of those reasons was because I never wanted anyone else to have that type of experience. I wanted policing to be a positive experience. I grew up in a very high crime area. I was always curious why some people committed crimes and some people didn't. And I just wanted to, you know, I had big dreams of making the world a better place. So that's kind of like led me on my long journey. But I love the people of Maplewood. I love the community. And, you know, I'm definitely always here to help.
Thank you, Captain Malloy. Who wants to jump in next? I don't want a cold call.
I'll go.
Okay.
Hi guys, my name is Patrolman Byron Lewin. For the most part, I had a very decent childhood as far as dealing with the police officers because I played football. And back in my hometown of Carteret, almost every coach I had was a police officer, from Port Authority to the Carteret Police Department. So being a Maplewood officer and even getting the calls that we do get for the kids playing at next to the library, playing football, saying that they're causing some kind of havoc is kind of tough for me. So, you know, even knowing that, I go out there and I play ball with the kids because kids, that's what they're supposed to do. So for the most part, I've always had very good interactions with police officers. I do remember one particular time when I was in college and I would go back and forth. I did dorm, but I would go back and forth because of course my parents missed me a little bit. And one day I was on the Parkway and I'm driving normally as I normally do every week. And I was pulled over, kind of, you know, not knowing the law at that time. The officer asked to search my car, or kind of had almost a coercive kind of manner about him to either search the car or give me a ticket. So I chose to search my car. I know that nothing was in it, and you know his grounds behind it was that he smelled the odor coming from the car, which is impossible because I love cars, and first off, I don't let anyone smoke and I don't smoke, so it was impossible at the time. But I didn't know any better. But he searched my whole entire car, threw my stuff on the floor, and kind of embarrassed me on the side of the roadway, which is really tough. And just like Captain Malloy, I don't want those interactions for anybody. Most of the kids in the town know me. Usually when I come on scene, it's more of a friendly vibe because I know where they come from. I know who they are, and most of the parents I know. So it's a little bit different when I come up, when they're in some suspicious, and I know that they're just kids playing tag or walking around a building, or you know, just being curious. So those are my positive and negative. Anybody need anything ever, you guys can always reach out to me.
Sergeant DeSico, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just hit the unmute. I'll be brief. Sergeant Vinny DeSico. I've been on the Maplewood Police Department for 19 years now. I grew up in town. I was raised on Ohio Street. My parents have a business in town. They've had for years. My brother-in-law's in the fire department. My sister works for the South Orange school system. So to say that, you know, I'm vested in the town, you know, my life has been in that town. As Aaron stated, one of the hats I wear is a watch commander, to be the boss of you know, the officers on the road. In addition to my time spent on the road with them, it's been a pleasure working with Aaron, with Paul, with the review board, going over the data, the facts, trying to put the information out there in regards to the 911 calls, educating the residents of the town as to when to call, when not to call, and really kind of like redefining what is suspicious activity. You know, in my years there, the amount of calls, and, you know, Erin and Paul can attest this in terms of like what is suspicious. If someone calls because there's you know, black male sitting in his car across the street from their house and they feel that they've been there too long, they'll call and come to find out it's a realtor or something, like a legitimate reason why they're there. But putting the information out there, letting people know, you know, think before you call. Don't just call, you know, for whatever the reason you think or, you know, you have in your head. Explain as to, you know, what is your purpose for calling and what is it you want the department to do in responding to these calls. So, you know, just looking to continue that relationship with the review board and, you know, helping out any way we can.
Thanks, Sergeant Pasico. Sergeant Reeves.
Good evening. Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Sergeant Scott Reeves. I've been with the department now. I'm in my fifth. I just started my 15th year. I actually run the traffic bureau as a to work. I agree with Sergeant DeSico in a lot of what he said. Basically, I just want to echo some of the things that he pointed out with people calling when they assume that someone does not fit the area, does not fit where they need to be. We really need to work better on alleviating those type of calls to coming from to us, because everyone that you see that you think may or may not fit what is in your lifestyle does not mean that they shouldn't be in a park, that they shouldn't be walking down the street, that they shouldn't be doing certain things. I grew up 2 towns away. I grew up in East Orange. I've had both positive and negative interactions with police officers. I've been placed in handcuffs when I was young. They actually thought I was part of a robbery of a pharmacy that was Park Avenue. I had nothing to do with it, but we went through the whole gamut. My mother being upset, my sister, my family. So I understand that point. I understand walking down the street. If someone calls, they think you're looking into driveways when you can really be looking out for cars, but they may not understand exactly what's going on. But if something looks suspicious, that's where the problem comes in. And we really need to think of a better way to try to address the situation, because there are circumstances where we don't need that. And a lot of times people are just walking down the street, or they're going to a friend's house, or they're doing certain things. So if there's a way that we can all come together and understand that everyone is not guilty, everyone black, brown, Hispanic, they're not guilty of these things. We are here and we are normal people just like everyone else. So we have to look deep inside our own biases and try to understand how we can come together and make a positive change for everyone. That's it for me.
Thanks, Sergeant Reeves.
Thank you.
Officer Rella.
Hey everyone, good evening. How are you? My name is Lindsay. I've been a cop with Maplewood in September. I'll be on my 7th year. Prior to that, I was in Asbury. I just want to say I'm more than a cop. I don't wear that as my identity. I am a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a mother, I'm a wife. I have an 11-year-old son. I was a single mom, had him at 19. So I see people out there when they are struggling. That was me at some point. So I do have a different type of outlook. I know what it's like to have to beg, borrow, steal, scratch to get what you need in life. I know that right now we're in a bad spot, universally, nationally. Look on social media, you turn the TV on, you can't go anywhere without seeing some sort of conflict, whether it's political, whether it's police, whether it's this, whether it's that. Add COVID into the mix, everyone's at kind of a higher level there. I do want to make a difference here, okay? Not just in Maplewood, but I want to kind of leave my footprint on the world. Like Erin had previously said, I am now working with Captain Malloy. I was in patrol for the majority. For the past, I would say about 6-7 months, I've been in the training department as almost like a pseudo training officer. With Captain Malloy, we've realized that we need to do more. We need to have trained officers. So we've been kind of rolling out different things that isn't necessarily required, but we want to make sure that the majority of our officers have that to try to alleviate and avoid some tumultuous situations that may not have needed to happen. I'm not gonna lie, I don't have any negative police experiences. When I was growing up, I was a pain in the ass. My parents said they'd rather re-raise my two older brothers than me, but I kept my nose clean knowing that I wanted to have something in life that, you know, something on my record would have prevented me from having. Having said that, could my race have been an issue with that, or non-issue rather? Possibly. But it was one of those things where I made a conscious effort to always be respectful when I was interacting with anyone and always kind of give the same respect that I was getting. I look forward to more meetings like this in the future. And I think that all of us as a community in Maplewood need to have better education and more of a level playing field with what's expected from both sides.
I want to thank you, Officer Vella. I wanted to add one thing in terms of changing the dialogue in our community is owning as a community, as the taxpayers, the support that we give for training. One of the things that came out through the early conversations to understand what was going on with the Maplewood Police Department and how to rejigger the department with Chief Duvall taking over, getting rid of the street crimes unit and changing that dynamic was it came out how poorly funded our township funded the training budget within the police department. And if we want to support, if we want to see the change that we want to see and to stop these bias instances and God forbid something that actually be a tragedy, we need to make sure we're providing the support. So that sort of training that Captain Malloy is leading and Officer Rella are working on. So that's just my quick soapbox there. Detective Jamodi, you work a ton with our youth in Maplewood. I'm sure also South Orange because of us, the shared our shared school district. So talk to us a little bit, take the badge off and the armor off and tell us a bit about you as a kid, you as a teen potentially, and what you hope to see going forward.
So growing up, I had a lot of negative interactions with the police, not because of my skin color, but because of family connections. Growing up, my mother was an addict and a shoplifter. A lot of members of my family also did some stuff, that were illegal. The police knew who I was and who my family was, so they would continually stop me. And it was a negative and a positive interaction at the same time. I witnessed my mother have an overdose, and the police officers who were familiar with my mother basically walked over her and rolled her on her side, kind of joked around while me and my sister kind of just sat there. And my DARE officer, who was a juvenile detective in the town I grew up, actually walked in, laid into those officers and pulled us aside. And up until I was 18, followed up with us to see how we were doing, to a point where just 2 years ago, we had the police expo in Livingston and he retired a captain. I grew up in Bloomfield Police Department, and he actually remembered me. So I never really wanted to be a cop till I was about 23. I actually had a brief conversation with him. And he's like, why don't you go into police work and do something? I can see you're passionate working with kids. I always went back to my high school and talked to the community, and the school. So I got involved in this. And then, Chief Duvall and Deputy Chief Sally were able to give me the opportunity to become a community policing member, plus the juvenile detective. And I just rolled with it. And then I was very lucky enough to meet with Eric Stoudemire, the Maplewood Middle School social worker, and he extended the olive branch to participate with the Real Talk program and all of those other programs. And I really am I tell the kids my story that I just said that I've told the kids. The goal is to really just explain that you're more than just the badge, and I explain that to the kids a lot. Like, I hear a lot that 99% of the cops are good people. And I explain to the kids, listen, a badge doesn't make you a great person, right? It's your morals, it's your character, it's what you do when the badge isn't on and what you really feel like deep down. So I just try to keep it real with these kids And, we all, the whole PD, we're really, the whole mindset going forward is to keep these kids out of the system, work with the community, strengthen that bond with the kids and the community, and just keep it moving. It's tough with everything that's going on now. It seems like every step we take, something else pops up. We have to take 5 steps back, but we really have to just keep trucking along, and that's it.
There's some questions popping up that I'd love to start answering because I see we're about an hour and a half in, and I also want to be respectful of everyone's time. The basic question I think we can answer quickly is, how many officers are on the Maplewood PD? Are they assigned to a regular beat? And if not, might that be helpful in terms of building trust and relationships with community members?
Deputy Chief Sally, you want to take that one?
Sure. The question was, do they work a regular beat?
How many police officers are on the force, and do they have a regular beat? Yeah.
The question, DC Sally, was overall head count on the department, and how are officers staffed by division? Do they have a regular beat? Does everyone go on patrol, or are people subspecialized?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm having a little technical difficulty here, but so at full department, we have 64 members. We have individual bureaus. So we have a community service Moni's in, we have a traffic bureau, which Sergeant Reeves runs, and then we have a detective bureau, a regular detective bureau also, and then we have a patrol division where most of the officers work. So they have, they stay on a specific shift. So shift 1 is our midnight shift. They work late night into the morning. Our second shift is days, and then we have an evening shift. Shift 3 is our evening shift. So yeah, they pretty much stay on the same shifts. And then each year we pick, and then the officers can pick their new shifts by seniority.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Sally. So I want to ask a follow-up based on the video that Emily, thank you for meeting with local youth that I'm sure you're missing seeing in person in the actual library. And Paul, also thank you for crowdsourcing feedback from our team. So we'll talk in 2 dynamics. So for history, under previous administration of the police department, there was a policy called the Street Crimes Unit, which it was horrible in every way, shape, and form. I don't know if Captain Malloy or DC Sally or Officer Rella, or actually any of the officers, can talk about how do you shift? One of the comments that came out from the teams was the tone and approach of officers. How do you guys shift that mindset to be more community oriented and more engaging? And how can we as community members follow the training that you're getting?
Right. So it comes from the top, it comes from administration. So if the administration wants a more community service oriented police department, it will trickle down to the units. The prior administration, they're more on street crimes. So once the chief became chief and I became deputy chief, we never had a community service bureau before. So we started a community service bureau. It was no longer a street crimes unit. That street crimes unit became a traffic unit. That's pretty much like the #1 complaint we have in town is traffic. So that's why we have a dedicated traffic unit. And the street crimes unit, their purpose was to look for suspicious persons, suspicious vehicles, suspicious stops. And that was kind of like the philosophy of the department then. We switched that, and we are more of a community service model. So we have a dedicated unit, community service bureau, which not only try to interact with the youth, they also do seniors, citizen events, any kind of events we can interact with the community. Now the traffic bureau is, again, they focus on traffic, but it's not all about enforcement. It's about traffic safety, and Sergeant Reeves can answer this a little better than me, but it's also, accidents, education. They hand out flyers, they work with the AAA. So that's pretty much the shift that we took as the administration change.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Sally. I want to ask a follow-up I mean, I know all officers can go out on the road and respond to calls. I'd love to hear from the officers who are more regularly on the road, and for people who have been in the department with the shift, how are officers are adjusting in terms of being better responsive to being there for our youth and being understanding. You know, one of a couple of the comments that came out in the video and even in the text that Paul had put up on the PowerPoint were comments such as the situation starts already from a negative place. And so how do you, when you arrive on a scene, how do you de-escalate the situation so we reduce and hopefully eliminate negative interactions between police and our youth of color?
Anybody want to jump on this? Lewin, I see you unmuted.
If you want to go first, you can go first. I'll go after.
So one thing that, you know, has kind of been being rolled out is taking more verbal judo classes opposed to unarmed self-defense. Okay, where you're kind of given that head start before the situation escalates to a point where you need to use a physical force. Maybe, you know, you can brew something up word-wise and kind of de-escalate it. The other thing is that, you know, I will say you picked a very good panel because you have a lot of different point of views here. The one thing that we do all share in common is a lot of us will go into a situation very calmly, not expecting the kind of give and take that I'm the cop, you're the person I'm dealing with. We approach people not as friends, but as a very easygoing, let's see where this attitude can get us before we start screaming and throwing around authority and giving out orders. The one thing I will say is we do need to do something that gets the community on board with not picking up the phone and hitting 3 numbers every time they see something. Okay, because then that puts us in a bad situation and it puts everyone now in a bad situation. The thing that gets me every time is you have an anonymous caller for suspicious activity. You go to the house, there's a Black Lives Matter sign on the front lawn, yet you just called on 3 Black juveniles. So what's the deal here? Do Black Lives Matter just not on your lot and block, or what made their activity suspicious? You go up and talk to the kids, they're bouncing a basketball. I mean, that's the most suspicious thing that a kid's gonna do, then God bless them. So you're getting a newer generation of officers with a different mentality and a different mindset. You're not getting an error, and you said it earlier, Wild Wild West. You probably got that from me, okay?
I got that from you, Officer Rella.
So, I mean, you get this old school mentality where you're going to throw around the badge, you're going to throw around the weight. You know, there was that blue wall of silence. That has been pretty much done away with through body cameras, through review of body cameras, through now everyone's being held to a higher standard. So if I see, just say, Officer Lewin doing something or Detective Jamodi, first off, I'm not cool with it. And second off, I don't want to lose my job, to be completely honest. So you have that added element now where you have eyes 360, camera phones. The dynamic is changing, and also the mentality of the officers is changing. That's all I got.
Thanks, Officer Rella. Officer Lewin.
That was great. That was great. Just from what you said earlier, with the change of the administration, it's this administration is more empowering. So just like the open gym, when myself and Sergeant Lawson came up with this idea to say, we want these kids to have somewhere to go after school. When we brought it to the administration, it was a full go ahead. I got here kind of at the end of the last administration, but it was definitely a little more tense to say, hey, I'm going out there to go do community service work. Now it's something that is a part of your day. As far as the administration goes, it's always for the community. What are you gonna do for the community? And now with that, they allow us now to be able to de-escalate a lot of different situations the way that we can. And, you know, being out in the community, as even Lindsay has worked side by side with me, when me and her walk up to a scene, you know, where we don't antagonize the situation. We diffuse everything because we both are very good at communicating, and we are both very good at also getting our point across, where, you know, maybe someone else from a different department or something may escalate that to somewhere where they don't even want it to go. We want to just have it as small as possible. So I do have to commend our administration. I do have to commend a lot of the officers in our police department. Have always, and to be honest with you, even our traffic bureau, those guys are out there doing community service bureau on top of all of their stuff. They're helping Detective Jamodi with his community service stuff. So it's a lot of stuff, and no sergeant, no captain, no lieutenant has ever said no to going to an event, going to a drive-by with the police cars, no block party or any of that. So it's a great place to work, to be honest with you. Not trying to be a teacher's pet or anything like that. I know Jamodi's gonna get me tomorrow. Oh yeah, good job.
So Emily has a couple of questions in the chat here, and I'm gonna turn it over to her.
Yeah, there's some great questions coming in, and I know just also, I just want to address this too. I know Detective Jamodi's name came up a lot in the teen interviews, and I know he and I have had conversations before in dealing with the teens, and he really opened my eyes too about when to call the police, sort of thinking about what it means for you guys to come and what it means for the teens. So I really just want to show my appreciation to the police department for being so open and honest about this stuff. So there's a question, wondering what do kids and students think about programs that involve the police, such as the open gym and pizza nights and stuff like that? Is this a positive experience for students, and are there better ways for the police to engage with the community? And I'm going to open up to the officers, but I do want to say, I know that I've heard mixed results from teens about this, but I know open gym is like huge. The teens love it. They love the opportunity to be active and to work with you guys on sort of that level playing field, right? So I just wanted to throw that in there, but if anyone else has anything to add to that.
So we, our unit was able to piggyback off of the open gym from the high school that was created by Patrolman Lewin, Sergeant Lawson, Sergeant Fields. And we did it in the middle school, and both open gyms are at capacity every time we have them. A lot of the stuff we do in this agency goes under the radar, right? We do it because it needs to be done, right? So it's not just the open gyms. It's not just the coffee with the cops. We're out there helping these families and the kids that really need it. We partnered with, I keep bringing up Eric Stoudemire, the social worker from the middle school, but I partnered with him, and he reaches out and says, hey, listen, this family needs X, Y, Z. And I call Lewin, and he gets stuff together real quick. Like we do a lot of stuff. I can't stress enough how much stuff we do under the radar because it just needs to get done, right? Like there's a time and a place for photo ops, but making sure kids and families get what they need is not the time or the place, whether it's the coat drive or the back to school supplies or just food, right? Through COVID, we got so much food donated. My unit, we wrote grants, and we were able to get grants, and, Target gave us $2,500 for grants for school supplies that we were able to turn into food. We partnered with BCB Bank and got five families, I think 5 families, $500. I know it wasn't a lot, but we were able to allocate that month's supply to the next month to make sure that these families kept going. There's just so many different aspects that we do. The open gym is just the tip. And it starts the relationships going so that we know these families, we know these kids, and they get comfortable where they can reach out and go, hey, listen, is there something you can do with X, Y, Z? So, we do so much with the community and the kids going forward. We just want to continue doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a great question here. A lot of attention has been given to what police officers can do to strengthen community relations. What are effective ways for civilians to be an active part of the solution?
I'm going to jump in again one more time. So I've had 2 negative calls in the last couple of years. One of the roles I have as the community policing, one of the officers, is we check school corners in the morning, make sure the crossing guards are present during the school day. And one of the kids from my Real Talk program was walking to school, Tuscan Boyden. I was literally in the process of pulling up to say hello to him, and a 5:30, which is considered a suspicious condition, came up for an unknown black male in the area looking down driveways and matching him to his description. And I called it out right there. I was like, Central, he's walking to school. Like stop. Okay, so, and I addressed it with the Real Talk group later that day. I said, this is real stuff. This is what happens. Okay. And then while I was in the high school on a meeting, there was a fight that broke out. and there was a family that was pulling their kid out of the school, and I overheard that one of the parents say, "I told you, they're all mutants." And we called them out. You know, the principal and myself said, "I hope you're not really referring to these kids as mutants. Like, what are we doing here? Like, what is the goal in this statement?" And she just brushed me off and walked out of the building. That's the mentality. It has to change overall, right? It can't just be us. It can't just be it has to be a collective. And I think it starts with this, right? Communication going forward on both ends, right? We have to be able to have those difficult conversations, right? It can't just be one-sided. It can't just be simple questions and answers. Let's have those difficult conversations so that we can really get to the meat of everything so we can move forward. That's it.
I'll jump into a lot of people out in the community don't really understand the vast amount of calls that we get from these suspicious. I literally was at work today, had a call, suspicious individuals. I don't want any part of it, but they're suspicious. These callers, I've also had interaction with the callers that say, "Okay, you can come talk to me as well." And when we ask certain questions, what were they doing? What were they actually doing? Were they just there, or were they looking down a driveway? Were they going up to windows, checking windows? Were they setting up a stool on either window to get in somewhere? What were they doing? And a lot of people that have asked that have also, called an attitude afterwards. As in, I know that they're doing something suspicious, but please, a lot of times it's, this is how you articulate. Tell us what this person is doing so that, all right, okay, if they are doing something suspicious, we want to know that so that we can possibly stop a burglary, stop a home invasion, stop a robbery, stop something. But I do believe that Maplewood is a great community. I wish I could afford to live there. Some of the communities are so tight knit where everyone has the keys to everyone's house, and everyone hangs out on Paul's porch. So it's a great community, but there are parts of the community where people are still living in that old school way where they'll have the Black Lives Matter on their front porch, like some of my colleagues have said, but you're the ones calling on kids literally that are your neighbor or 2 doors down. And a lot of times I feel like the best way to combat this as a community is we have to be real with ourselves in this situation and start to say, listen, I do have some prejudice. This person does make me nervous. This is what's going on, and then kind of educate yourself on that culture. If you go into my house, I'm of Jamaican heritage, right? So we talk loud. If you go into my house, you would think we're getting into an argument and we're literally laughing. If you don't know or educate yourself on different cultures, you are going to walk into that house. If I'm a police officer, now I know that people of Haitian descent or Jamaicans talk very loud and talk very close. They want to come close to you. I might now be, on guard to push someone backwards, but in all reality, he's getting close to me to kind of level with me in a sense. So, definitely, don't be afraid to admit that. Yeah, sometimes you have some kind of bias, some kind of prejudice, and don't be afraid to go out there and educate yourself on these multiple cultures that we have in our community that form, a really good community. I've talked enough. You guys go ahead.
Yeah, I want to make sure we end before 9. So we have a bunch more questions I'd love to get through. There's a question on training here. How many officers, if any, have completed crisis intervention training, CIT? Will Maplewood Police Department have representation at the next Essex County CIT training?
Hi, I'll fill that one. When training is available, CIT, I personally have gone. There's a bunch of officers in our department that have gone. We always try to make sure we can send at least a few people to everyone eventually to get the entire department trained. We're also looking for any trainers, coaches, people who conduct webinars. My email's on the website to reach out to me. We're looking to see if they can bring some webinar to our building. Because of COVID, we can't really send a lot of people out. But if they hold these broadcasts, if they make them available, I can send them out, assign officers, have them log in. That would be of great benefit to us.
Thank you. So question here, what's being done to teach residents what 911 is for beyond our when to call flyer, which we're going to show you guys in a little bit too? Whose job and responsibility is it to dismantle stereotypes, and sort of how do we create safe spaces for teens so that they don't feel like they're getting called out on by the community?
Well, one thing I'll jump in on the safe spaces for our teens. There was a comment actually, and I can't scroll back up on my screen, but from Detective Baez regarding bringing back programs like the Hub and areas where our youth can, hang, because we really don't have those types of programs within the area. But in terms of addressing the community, I want to hear from the officers. Some of you have mentioned that when you've responded to calls, you've actually spoken to the caller about, hey, let's talk about what's going on. What are some things that you have found to break through to people to help change their ways, or at least help them to pause before they make that call the next time?
So I'll take this one. For part of it, at least. Maplewood is an ever-changing place. The same people that lived on your street today are not going to live there next week. The one thing that I try to do, okay, they might not be suspicious, they might just be new. And that's something that I try to kind of enforce. Now, having said that, when you either buy or rent or call a place your home, you should be able to have family over, friends over, and have them feel just as safe as you do in your own town. Okay, so just because there's a suspicious male or a suspicious female or suspicious anything, because everyone loves to throw that word around. That's just like, that's the word to say because you know that multiple police are coming the moment you say suspicious. And that comes from the see something, say something. It's a trigger word. But the thing that I try to enforce is you don't know the person that lives behind you. You don't know the person that lives next to you. Okay, you don't know if that person lost their house in foreclosure and now a whole new family's coming in. Okay, you don't know the situation. Just because there's not a for sale sign doesn't mean that the people don't belong here. And that's one thing that I try to kind of really force, that these are your neighbors. They live a street over, they live across the street. And that's something that kind of gets through to people. And that's one of those things that kind of resonates and sticks. Okay, maybe I shouldn't be so trigger happy with the phone to call and say, I have X, Y, and Z in front of me.
I think we've also gotten real lucky with this current administration, because the old administration, if there was no cause, when you went to the call and you determined there was no cause, they still expected you to take information, right? So you weren't able to just clear, right? No cause, keep it moving type thing. This administration's like, no, use common sense, right? If you don't need to be there, if it was a miscommunication, clear it as just that and keep it moving. So I think that helps as well. And that goes with our communication with juveniles as well. If, unfamiliar to the area and you go there and it's like, oh, I'm just looking for my cousin who lives at this address. Okay, they're just central. They're looking for this address. The old administration wanted you to take that kid's info for a report, whereas this administration's going, no, that's not needed. It's just, confusion, and you cleared it up, keep it moving. So that helps a lot, because that's a negative interaction with the youth of the community and or just a community member, where we're trying to make more positive interactions and, by decreasing the negative interactions as well. So it's a fine line, I think, that they were able to see immediately. So I think going forward, I think that helps us a lot as well.
Great. I would love to get 2 more questions in before we wrap it up. There's a question here about, are there certain reasons that officers must respond to Columbia High School? And are there reasons police have responded to the high school that the officers here think can be handled by someone else more effectively?
I will take that as well. So I'm a member of the community service unit. I'm also the juvenile detective, and I'm also the liaison to the schools. Okay. So my main goal as the juvenile detective is to keep these kids out of the system, right? Working with the restorative justice panel, working with the members of the school administration, okay? They have my cell phones, they have my cell phone number. So they'll call sometimes and go, hey, is this a police issue? No, good. Because my main goal is to make sure that police don't have to respond to the school for nothing, okay? but I also make it a priority of mine where if police do have to go, the majority of the time I try to be the one that shows up there. The administration, the staff, they know my face. If it is involving a student that we have to contact parents because there's criminal charges that may come or whatever have you, I make sure that I'm the first one there. I'm speaking to the parents on scene at the school, and we're not taking these kids out in handcuffs. Okay, that's the goal. Okay. I know we have Officer Lewin that works day shifts. He is remarkable. So if I'm not available, the majority of the time I'll call him and go, hey, listen, can you do me a solid? And vice versa. He's like, hey, listen, I'm hearing this, X, Y, Z. There's a communication. Him, Officer Williams. There's a lot of officers that are dedicated to this initiative going forward, keeping these kids out of the system, no matter, whatever we can do within our parameters of the law. The prosecutor's office, we have to communicate with as well. And it's going well. We've only had to take 2 kids out of the school in the last 3.5 years, only because their parents weren't available to meet them at the school. No handcuffs. We didn't transport these kids in handcuffs. We brought them to headquarters and we awaited their parents, where we went over the restorative justice program and they were released to their parents. No charges were filed. They were able to complete the program, because that's the goal, right? It's one thing, I think, to say that we have this program. It's another thing to say that it's working. And we're very big on saying it's working. Okay, it's still in its infancy phase, the restorative justice program. We've had an interim principal. We finally have a full-time principal at the high school. We're trying to get with COVID, we weren't able to really get a lot of meetings going, but they all have my numbers so that they're willing to, they're able to contact me day or night, 24 hours a day, on the weekends. I've gotten phone calls all through the night. They give me the heads up on stuff. Hey, first thing in the morning, this is what we got. Okay, or vice versa. Hey, listen, I'm hearing this. It's a communication so that we don't have to respond to the school as much as we used to have to, because that's, we try to keep marked units away from the building as best as possible. Every time we go there, we call something, we call it out, it's logged. We meet with the principals, we let them know that we're in the building, and we go from there.
I just want to add real quick that all of our responses to the school are logged, so we know when we had contact with the school and police had contact with the school on everything.
Also, just on the contrary to what Detective Jamodi said, we also, like last year, the Community Service Bureau partnered with the Teen Driving on a program where we went into the school. Of course, we logged it like Deputy Chief and Jamodi said, went and met with the principal and the driving teacher, where we were talking about police interaction on motor vehicle stops. And so we do go there when we are invited to talk to the kids about motor vehicle stops, because at one point or another, they're all gonna be behind the wheel. And, just like myself, I've been pulled over. I'm sure everyone has. So, this type of education was, vital too, on what to say, what to ask for, don't think that I went there and I told the kids, this is what you have to do all the time. It was more of a conversation where we said, this is how the car stop will go. If you do X, Y, and Z, if it ever goes any differently, you reach out to me, I reach out to Detective Jamodi, and I guarantee you that if somebody did something wrong, they're gonna be seeing Captain Malloy. So it's great when we're invited. We love it, and we hope to be able to start a very strong bond where we can be in the schools more with programs like this.
And I know too, as someone at the library, I know I've worked really closely with the members of the Community Service Bureau to deal with issues that we've had with the teens. I don't know if anyone on this call has ever been at the library after school, but we have quite a crowd of teens. We're right across the street from the middle school. We have had our issues, but we've also had really great times, right? Obviously, you hear the voices of the teens that I get to see every day, which is awesome. But I know that I've been really grateful to the Community Service Bureau and to the MPD for helping me figure out the best ways to deal with teens. And I know that I've dealt with Detective Jamodi on that, and reaching out to specific teens' families that I maybe can't access, so that we can get to the root of a problem. I would love to finish off on this question, which is sort of a big question, but how has the way in which you perform your job changed as a result of recent developments, such as the Black Lives Matter and Defund the Police movements?
I'd like to jump in here quick on this. For me, it's changed because, again, I'm in charge of internal affairs. So I deal with a lot of complaints of police misconduct, procedural errors, departmental errors. It's changed because I always approached it with a sense of compassion for the person making the complaint, but I try to give extra understanding to where they're coming from. Because a lot of times when I hear what the complaint is, some of it is the person's perception of events because they're coming to the situation with some extra feelings about what's going on in the bigger global world of policing. It may not be necessarily what happened with them and the Maplewood police officer, but sometimes that person's bringing extra things with them. So when I speak to them and really get to the nature of the complaint, sometimes I have to take some time to unpack some of that. For example, I have someone said, I think the police are following me as I'm driving. Did that happen? She said, I thought the police, ran my plate, certain things happened, and those things didn't happen. There, we keep a record of anytime a plate is run, anytime an address is checked. I did that didn't happen. But that was me like unpacking her perception of what she thought about the police and her own personal fear of that interaction. Because sometimes there really are misunderstandings on both sides. They don't understand what our procedures are, certain things we have to do, certain things are legal for us to do versus things that are inappropriate. So for me, it's really just come from a place of understanding. I try to be as open as I can. Anytime I see someone, I always say, if something bad happened or you feel bad about something, please let us know. It doesn't help for you to badmouth us on social media. It doesn't help for you to post something for a bunch of people to get together and say, okay, the police are all terrible. Look at all what happened. It's helpful for you to communicate with us as well. And I try to be here to be that ear to listen, to field those complaints, to really make sure that we're following the policies set up for us, and we're giving the community what they expect.
Just a really quick one before we close out too. Was wondering if one of the officers will be willing to give like a really clear definition of like what's suspicious and what's not. We're going to share the who to call in just a second, but one of the things we'd like to really make sure folks take home is what are things that really are suspicious they should call, and then what are things that they should ask themselves before they actually call someone. And while you're doing that, I'm going to put up this one pager for folks to look at.
Lou, and you agree that's a hard thing to kind of make black or white?
It is very, very hard.
It's like asking someone, what's the right shade of green? So suspicion, it's an issue of perception. If you see someone just standing outside and they're maybe talking by a vehicle, I'm going to say that's not suspicious, okay? Now, if you see someone going to a vehicle, walking up, then walking off, another person walking up, walking off, walking up, walking off, okay, that might raise some suspicion. But when you call up and all you got is, I got a guy sitting in front of my house in a car with nothing else, then that's not suspicion. So it's one of those things where it's 99% perception. So it's hard to say a definitive kind of thing. Loon, you got anything to add to that?
I'd say that if it's something that you can see yourself doing, in a sense, like today, we had a suspicious caller of someone at the park. When I went to the park, I said, hey, I go to the park and sometimes I just want to reflect on my day if I'm having a bad day. So I'm staring at this guy from my patrol vehicle a little ways away, so I don't really kind of make him nervous or anything. And I literally took a little video and I sent to the sergeant. I said, he's not doing anything. He's at the park, not suspicious. If you see someone, I've also been in a situation where I've seen a kid. He was new to the neighborhood in the Hilton section, and he had chair under his window, and he was going actually into his own apartment. Yes, it was suspicious. When I got there, I actually was able to call his mother on my cell phone and find out, yeah, we just moved there. He probably locked his keys inside the house. That's our address. Okay, cool. It was suspicious, but now we learned that it's not. So things like that. If it's something that you can kind of imagine yourself as doing, sitting in your car sometimes after work, after a hard day, your kids are inside screaming and yelling, and you just want to sit there for a second. Not suspicious normally, but it's a very tough question to say this is suspicious, this is not suspicious.
Got it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't want to take up too much time, but I just wanted to add to that. It's really helpful to take the word suspicion out of it and literally just have people describe behaviors. Like, don't think about things as suspicious or not. What we really need legally anyway to take any type of police action is behaviors. Just tell us exactly what you see. You don't even need to use the word suspicion. There's a person doing this. They're standing here. They've been here for this amount of time. They're doing this, they're doing that. It doesn't even matter if it's suspicious. That's like an interpretation thing that you bring your own bias with it. If you just strictly describe the behaviors, then the police will get there and monitor behaviors, and then they'll make a determination if that person even needs to be approached. It's very helpful to give a lengthy list of not a suspicious person, but a description of behaviors. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Captain Malloy. I want to follow up on one thing very briefly. I recognize the hour here. I know you've mentioned in other programs that we've been a part of together, and Officer Lewin mentioned it as well, in terms of when a call comes in, how has the department shifted in terms of observing what happens before interacting with the person that was called, that the person called in on? So I think Officer Lewin mentioned how he sat back a little bit the other side of the park to observe behavior before, and he didn't even actually interact with the individual who was in the park today. So I don't know if you guys could talk a little bit about how you're training, I don't know, Sergeant DeSico, in terms of how you're training officers that are out on the road right now in terms of making sure they take those steps to check before they interact.
Well, just to piggyback, Officer Lewin, it goes to training and discretion and just thinking about the situation. Is it something I would do? When you get there, you have to jump out and run up to the person, or what was the call for? Is it something as simple as Paul's had some of the reports where, again, someone walking their dog, sitting in their car for an extended period of time. Nothing that strikes anyone as odd or bizarre or quote unquote suspicious that needs a reaction right away when the officers get there. Take the time, sit back, observe, and kind of let some of the situation play out for itself.
I do want to add that I'll say, like Lindsay, we were hired the same exact time. When I first started being a police officer, and I had all these big dreams that one day I will accomplish, and we were getting these calls for the person outside sitting in a car. I will tell you the consensus with all of the officers here, when you, like Captain Malloy said, are not telling us that this person is exhibiting this type of behavior. They're not having some kind of burglary tool in their hand trying to get in somewhere. It almost seems that you are almost using the police as a pawn to tell people to move away from in front of your house. These cars are parked legally, and we've shifted completely against going up to the people and just almost starting to field inquiry and getting their information, everything like that. We almost, I would say, almost every single officer now is trying to observe before they ever do anything, even just a regular conversation. I particularly don't want to have a regular conversation with you if you were not doing anything wrong, because I don't know if you're into, if you see me in the center, if you see me at Wawa, I'll talk to you all day long. But if I know I'm getting a specific call from it, I don't even want to approach you because in a way, I can already see that you're just sitting in your car, and I don't want to be the person to tell you to move somewhere. You're American. You can be wherever you need to be, wherever you want to be. You know, I've had calls where people have called on their exact neighbor, and they're, you know, the car might be a little foggy or whatever, or something. There, people are sitting in the car. You know, the windows do get foggy. But you know, the consensus is almost throughout the department where we feel that a lot of people do call just to use us as pawns to do what they want us to do, as far as go up to a car and kind of make people nervous where they're gonna move anyway, even if we tell them, okay, you guys aren't doing nothing wrong, have a nice day. They're gonna drive off anyway because they're like, oh, the cops are messing with us. They're gonna come back and mess with us again, kind of situation.
Thank you, Officer Lewin. Paul, I want to turn it back to you with, I think we have just a couple minutes left to close out the night. And I want to say thank you to everyone for attending tonight. Thank you to members of the community that have shared questions and comments in the feed. And this starts with the regular open dialogue to make the change we all want to see. So Paul, back to you.
Yep. Okay. Now, I'm very respectful of everybody's time. I know we've run a little bit over, and just want to thank everybody for participating. Thank you very much to all of the officers who shared your opinion very candidly with us today. I think that's been very helpful. Huge thanks to the youth who you know, shared their opinions candidly, and to the library staff as well for partnering with us on this one. And we know there's some questions that we did not get to that were in the chat. So we will send those out to the attendees along with the actual slides from the day. And I would actually love to collect feedback. Like, we're having such a rich discussion that there was a portion where we wanted to get feedback from the community on what are things and ideas that you guys have. We didn't do that because we're having such a good discussion here. So when we send that out, we'll probably also send a link for you to provide your thoughts and feedback on suggestions for us and all of that. With that, I'll turn over to Emily, who will give the final closing words.
No, I just wanted to thank everybody again. Thank all of you that are on the panel. Thank you guys for taking your time tonight and listening to this. I'm going to throw my email in the chat. If anyone has any immediate thoughts that they want to share with us, or things that maybe the library can do, other programs like this that might be helpful for the community, please let us know. We're here for you guys. And we also wanted to share that we do have our Ideas Festival that we've been rescheduling and working on. So some of these programs that are going to be coming up in the fall are actually relevant to this conversation too. So just keep your eye on our website for that. And thank you again. Thank you to the Maplewood Police Department for joining us. Thank you to the Community Board on Police. And I hope everybody has a great night.
Yeah, one quick one too. Shout out to Mayor Frank as well, because
Yes.
he was actually the initial spark that got this panel going. So thanks, Frank.
Thank you all.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Yay.
This was wonderful. This was